Chapter 9 The Good Doctor September 13th, 2060 Site X, Area 51. The Robinson family and their companions descended the stairway for several minutes before emerging in a pitch-dark cavern. Emmanuel passed around flashlights, and soon enough the whole place was illuminated. "Oh, wow," Chihiro breathed. "This is where XCOM was founded?" "Right over there," Blake said, pointing to a stage on the far side of the mission control room. "That's where Myron Falk gave his speech, almost 100 years ago." The original XCOM headquarters was a very small and cramped place in comparison to the roomy facility in Kansas. A full century of neglect gave the place a haunting atmosphere. As everyone's eyes adjusted to the darkness, Josiah said, "Watch your step. There's bones on the ground." Akira looked at her feet. Just a few feet in front of her were the skeletal remains of a human. Gazing around, the group saw many other bones scattered about the place. "Back in '62, the Zujari ransacked the base," Blake explained. "So this is going to be a bit of a challenge. Everybody huddle up." The group came together in the middle of what used to be the Mission Control Center. Akira hung back, shooting suspicious glances at her parents. She didn't want to be a part of their little mission, but she still wanted to know what was going on. "We're looking for any information about the sleepwalker virus the old XCOM might have had," Blake explained. "Don't bother trying the computers down here. Technology in the 1960s is very primitive compared to nowadays. Plus, the aliens probably smashed all of the computers down here anyway. Search for anything written on paper. If the names Dresner or Weir come up, that's important. We're going to break into small teams so we can search faster. Asuna and Chi will go together. James and Josiah, you'll be a pair. Chris and, Blake looked around the group and then towards Akira. She could sense a little bit of desperation coming from her father, and it made her feel just a little better. Finally, Blake accepted the arrangement that would lead to the least conflict. "Chris, you'll go with me. Emmanuel, you and Akira will be a pair. Is that okay with everyone?" While murmurs of assent rounded the group, Akira picked up on the rising sense of apprehension coming from everybody in the group. She could also sense that some kind of argument had preceded this mission, and some people were still harboring resentments. As best she could tell, several members of her family, namely Alexander and Chihiro, were deeply opposed to bringing Akira on this trip. Others had apparently argued that including her was the only way to help Akira recover from her experiences on Kauai. Reluctantly, Blake allowed Akira and Emmanuel to move out as a pair. As the group split up and started searching, Akira aimlessly wandered into a nearby office and leaned against the wall, arms folded. Emmanuel grabbed a stack of crumbling papers from a desk and gave her a stern look. "No, I'm not going to help." Akira cut him off before he could speak. "Just leave me alone." Emmanuel shrugged and replied, "Suit yourself." He sat down on the remains of a wooden desk. The name William Carter was barely visible on a rusted nameplate. Akira scoffed. She could see into Emmanuel's mind, and it was obvious to her that he was pretending to be aloof, so that she might be interested in talking to him again. Well, fine. She wasn't going to play this game. Akira stuffed her hands in her pockets and left the room. She guessed that her father was hoping that she might still have feelings for Emmanuel, but that ship sailed months ago. Keeping her flashlight over her head, Akira wandered further into the ruins of XCOM HQ. She didn't really have a destination in mind, she just wanted to get away from her family, if only for a little while. Of course, the only way to leave this place was the way she'd come in. All other entrances or exits had long ago been caved in or demolished by the aliens. But if getting lost in the interior of this place could separate Akira from the others for a little while, then so be it. Pointing her flashlight down each corridor, Akira chose a path at random. As she went along, she noticed that several colored lines were painted on the floor. They were barely visible and had faded over the past century, but she could still make out a red, blue, and yellow line running parallel. She had a hunch why these were here, so she looked around in the darkness for anything on the walls. About 20 feet on, she found what she was looking for. A map of the facility was beaten down and barely legible, but enough of it remained to tell Akira that if she followed these lines on the floor, she would end up in either the Armory, the Sky Ranger Bay, or in the Research and Development Labs. On a whim, Akira picked the R&D lab. There wasn't any particular reason, she just had a feeling that going down that way might be interesting. For another 2 minutes or so, Akira fumbled around in the dark corridor, pointing her flashlight at anything that wasn't rocks or bones. She could tell the defenders of the base put up a furious fight near the R&D lab because the sheer volume of bones in the area was accompanied by the blackened marks of fire damage. Also, Akira found the skulls of 2 sectoids in the wreckage, along with the skeleton of a single Zujari warrior. Easily recognizable because Zujari mouths open sideways in relation to a human mouth. Just when things looked like they might actually get interesting, a voice echoed through the passageway behind Akira. "Hey, where are you?" Emmanuel's voice bounced off the many walls and corridors, eventually finding its way to Akira, who groaned loudly. She just wanted to be left alone. Was that too much to ask? When Akira opened her mouth to reply to Emmanuel, she was stopped cold by the sudden sounding of a second voice. "Oi, Sheila, is that you?" The voice of a strange man, speaking with an Australian accent, echoed out of the darkness. "You should have sent the signal, you know. I would have turned on the lights for you. Hold on." And with 3 very loud clicks, a series of fluorescent lights flickered and powered on, illuminating the hallway as clear as day. Akira instinctively crouched down behind some rubble and looked around for the new speaker. "Kira!" Emmanuel yelled. "What's going on? Where are you?" "Come on, Sheila," said the Australian voice. "You remember the way, right? Follow the blue line. Or the light, whichever you want, as long as you get here." Heart racing, Akira had a quick thought. She reached out with telepathy, trying to sense anyone and anything around her. In mere moments, a field of psionic energy permeated all of the abandoned base. Akira detected 8 people: Blake, Chihiro, her 4 siblings, Emmanuel, and Chris. There was nobody else in the ruins, which means that voice was not coming from a living human. Feeling confident in her powers, Akira turned her back to Emmanuel's inquisitive voice and followed the blue line, moving towards the source of the mysterious new voice. About 50 feet in front of Akira, there was a set of double doors. She supposed this must have been a decontamination chamber once. On the far side, an overhead light revealed the next room. This large chamber had once been the Research and Development Labs of the original XCOM. And it was here that the great surprise was waiting. The laboratory was fully powered. An air conditioner made gurgling sounds as it pumped a cool breeze into the lab, while on the far wall, about 300 feet away, a huge cylindrical machine rose from floor to ceiling. The outer casing of the device was transparent, allowing Akira to see a swirling green orb suspended in midair between 2 large apparatus. Her jaw fell open at the sight. "Is that?" Akira gasped. "Is that an Illyrium reactor?" Almost immediately, the Australian voice replied, "Aw, bloody hell, Moria. You got amnesia or something? Can't you go bush just once without something awful happening to you?" Akira jumped. One more time, she reached out with telepathy, checking to see if there was anybody in the lab with her. One more time, her senses told her the place was deserted. "Hello?" Akira called out into the room. "Who's there?" There was a brief pause before the voice said to itself, "Ah, crikey, that's not Moria." Then the voice spoke up. "Oi, Sheila, whoever you are, don't touch anything, all right? You leave all the computers alone, turn around, walk out, and tell Moria to hurry up and get back here with my new processor already. Now scram!" Akira did not scram. For the first time, she took note of what was occupying the 300 feet of floor space between herself and the Elarium reactor. It was a huge array of computers, all networked together with a series of thick electrical cables strewn all over the floor. The computers themselves were as diverse as they were numerous. Some were huge machines with spools of tape mounted on their sides, chugging away slowly in comparison to the boxy and noisy computers of the late 1990s just a few paces away. Several modern and early modern computers were present as well, including a single model Akira recognized. Near the center of the hodgepodge computer bank was a sleek black box that was nearly identical to a computer she'd seen at XCOM headquarters just over a year ago. Looking at the floor, Akira saw thousands of electrical cables all heaped in a mess. But some of the largest cables snaked their way back to the Elarium reactor and were no doubt providing power for the whole system. Something very strange was going on here. "Who's there?" Akira called into the rows upon rows of computer banks. The Australian voice sounded very annoyed. "Are you kidding? You still here? Piss off, girlie! Can't you see I'm working?" "No, I can't," Akira retorted. "I can't see you at all." "Well, according to my motion sensors, you're standing inside my brain," said the voice. "And I'd prefer it if you didn't." Akira froze in her tracks, not sure about what she just heard. She looked around one more time at the hundreds of computer banks all networked together, at the motion sensors and microphones scattered all over the place. Finally, she spotted a single camera sitting atop an old-world CRT monitor. Akira slowly walked over to the terminal and stared into the camera. "Are you an artificial intelligence?" she asked. The Australian voice scoffed, sounding offended. "Girlie, there's nothing artificial about me. Don't you know who I am? I'm guessing you're Moria's kid or something." I'm not sure who Moria is," Akira replied, not sure whether she should talk to the camera or to the microphone. "My parents are Stormbreakers. Lieutenant Robinson and Corporal Tachibana." There was a whirring sound nearby as one of the computers suddenly powered up a large fan. "Robinson, huh?" said the voice. "So you're XCOM. That's good, I guess. Anyway, you can call me Dr. Weir." Akira turned all the way around, expecting to see a man somewhere waiting for a handshake. Still, there was no one. "I can hear you, Doctor," she said, "but I can't see you. Where are you?" "I said it before, and I'll say it again. You're standing in me." And then the CRT screen lit up. A grainy black and white image appeared on the monitor. A man with a long face, strong chin, and half-moon glasses peered out of the screen, looking at Akira. On top of the monitor, a small servo motor caused the camera to reposition itself, focusing the lens on Akira's face. "You know, when you said the name Robinson, I thought you were talking about George Robinson. He was a good agent, one of the Bureau's best, after Carter, of course. George was good to me, but you don't look a damn thing like him. You look more like a chink." Akira flinched at the doctor's choice of words. It had been a long while since the last time somebody had been openly racist towards her. "George Robinson was my great-grandfather," Akira said. "What do you know about him?" "I don't kiss and tell, girlie," said the computer. "And if you're really a Robinson, what's your name?" "Akira." The image of the doctor's face assumed a disgusted expression. "You're a Jap," he said. "I fought your kind in Borneo, back in 45. I'm guessing they're letting your kind into XCOM now, huh?" Akira's mind seemed to overload. There was a lot here to process, and her mind seemed to be breaking down under the strain. What was he talking about? Borneo, along with the rest of the world, was liberated in 2035, not 2045, and there were very few, if any, Japanese people there at the time. The image of the doctor's face assumed a disgusted expression. "You're a Jap," he said. "I fought your kind in Borneo, back in 45. I'm guessing they're letting your kind into XCOM now, huh?" Akira's mind seemed to overload. There was a lot here to process, and her mind seemed to be breaking down under the strain. What was he talking about? Borneo, along with the rest of the world, was liberated in 2035, not 2045, and there were very few, if any, Japanese people there at the time. After trying to wrap her mind around all of this for a few seconds, Akira ended up spitting out the first thing that popped into her head. "I'm American," she snapped, "and you're just a racist computer. What the hell are you even doing down here?" The digital image of Dr. Weir frowned at her. "I'm calculating," he said. "Ever since I went through that dimensional gate in Arizona, I just needed to know." Dr. Weir's voice trailed off, as though he were reminiscing about something. At the mention of dimensional gates in Arizona, something seemed to click in Akira's mind. She suddenly understood everything. Well, almost everything. She remembered hushed conversations between XCOM's leaders back in the colony. How all of Earth's misfortunes with alien invaders had started in the year 1962, when an enemy called Origin opened up a series of dimensional gates all over the planet, allowing his armies to swarm across the world. She remembered how Dr. Teigen was constantly in awe of his predecessors, and how someone named Alan Weir had figured out how to send an Illyrium bomb through those gates to destroy the Zujari homeworld. Akira gasped. "It was you! You're Alan Weir, who went through the crack in the world!" "Yeah, that was me." Weir's voice sounded downright nostalgic. "Ever since that night, I've been trying to understand, to make sense of what we did that day. The creature Carter brought back with him opened up so much potential, too. I had the whole universe at my fingertips." There was a pause. Akira wondered for a second if the computer had locked up. And that was when the full realization abruptly hit her. "Wait a minute," she said. "Wait just a minute. You put yourself in a computer." "Not as bright as George, are you?" Dr. Weir muttered. "Yes, I did." "But why?" "Short answer, I ran out of time," Weir explained. "After Falk took down the outsider mothership and lost to Saru, I pretty much had to start back at square one for understanding the Venn gates. So I started over. Kiddo, you've got no idea. I worked and calculated and studied for almost 40 years, trying to crack the secret of the Venn gates. Eventually, I started seeing the signs that my body wasn't going to hold up much longer. But I wasn't ready to quit. I told myself I wouldn't stop until I found the answer. But there was just one variable that eluded me. One little piece of the puzzle I couldn't quite find a place for. So I contacted a friend of mine, my successor, actually, and she helped me arrange and execute this plan. Every once in a while, she checks in on me to make sure that all my systems are running smoothly and that I haven't been disturbed, which is exactly what you're doing." Akira's jaw dropped. She looked around the place once again and let out a low whistle. "All of this? Just to solve one problem?" "Not just any problem, girlie," Weir replied. "The problem. The greatest problem." On the screen, the image of Dr. Weir's face was replaced with a mathematical formula. Akira leaned in close to the monitor, trying to understand what she was seeing. "What is it?" she asked. "The cosmic speed limit," Weir said. "And the biggest obstacle in my research. You see, girlie, nothing in this universe can travel faster than light, because it would require infinite energy. And yet, somehow these Venn gates allow the outsiders to reach our world so quickly. They got here faster than light could travel here from their own world. And yet, they're not traveling faster than light. You see the paradox?" Akira put her hands on her hips and said, "Hyperspace. They just jumped." Dr. Weir interrupted. No. Moria and I thought of that after the elders showed up in 15. Look here, at these schematics." The math equation on the screen was replaced with a cutaway diagram of an alien spacecraft. Akira noticed a date in the corner. June 28th, 1963. "See here?" Weir said. "This is a transport vessel clearly designed for flight in deep space. Yet there's no hyperspace module, nor is there any recognizable component of a hyperspace system." Akira had to agree. She'd spent enough time aboard the Archangel to know what a hyperspace module looked like. She could recognize a quantum waveform generator on site, and this alien vessel didn't have one. Weir replaced the image with another. This time it was a city-sized mothership. The caption underneath said, "The Day the Sky Fell, June 1963. Once again, no matter how hard Akira squinted at the schematic, there was no sign of a hyperspace system, nor of the components for one. So if they didn't have a hyperspace system, then how did the aliens get here? Akira asked. How did the Venn gates work? I've been trying to solve that problem for almost 100 years, the doctor said, and I'm still hung up on that one paradox. But you know what the worst part of it all is, Sheila? The worst part? Akira repeated. What could be worse? Well, I think I know the answer, Weir admitted. I think I know, but I've got no way to prove it. Not without the solution to this problem. Until I can solve for the speed of light, it's just an unsubstantiated guess. Akira was hooked. This conundrum was probably beyond her, and she knew it. But focusing on Dr. Weir's problem allowed Akira to think about something other than what her parents had done to her and her friends. She was actually starting to enjoy this little escape from reality, and wanted to dive even further into hypotheticals about dimensional gates. So she asked Dr. Weir to share his guess. Time, the virtual doctor said. I think the key to everything lies in time. Specifically in one aspect of it. I theorize, that Venn gates allow a starship to displace its own position within space-time. It remains in the same physical location, yet by sidestepping into another dimension and waiting there, its relationship to time is somehow altered when the vessel comes back into normal space. How? Why? I haven't the faintest idea. I need more information. I need the solution to the speed of light. A new sound reached Akira's ears. A machine somewhere was running. What's that noise? She asked. Oh, just the printer, Weir replied. I always print off my latest calculations and research for Moria to review when she visits. She restocks any consumables I need and keeps the place functioning. She wants to know the answer too, just like me. Akira wanted a few answers as well. She didn't fully understand the nature of the problem. Even though Akira knew hyperspace systems very well, the concept of dimensional gates was new to her. She started to ask another question when a voice echoed out of the decon chamber she entered through. Kira, are you down here? Oh, bloody hell, now what? Weir groaned. 4 people appeared on the far side of the room. Blake Robinson, James, and Josiah were led into the room by Emmanuel, who was saying, She went down this way. Akira swore quietly. Then, moving as softly and quietly as she could, she dashed over to a large tray where a printer was depositing sheets of paper on a huge stack. Akira scooped up about 300 pages in her arms and then sat down on top of one of the computers, pretending to read. A moment later, her father called out, "There she is! Akira, don't just run away like that." "What?" Akira snarked. "You wanted me to find some ratty old papers to read, so I did. Now leave me alone." The twins shrugged their shoulders and then took an interest in the massive server bank in the middle of the room. As soon as they approached, Dr. Weir's voice shouted, "This is not a bloody meeting place! Scientific research is being done down here! Please leave!" Akira couldn't help but feel sorry for the computerized doctor, as the outburst only served to draw more attention to him. Before long, all of the Robinson family was in the room, along with Chris. Dr. Weir was forced to reintroduce himself and tell his story to the others. And once again, he uttered the same anti-Asian racist slang when he saw Chihiro. Eventually, after a conversation that Akira mostly ignored, Blake brought the subject around to the sleepwalker virus. "Crikey, is that what you're here for?" Weir said to Akira's father. "Look, mate, you might have wasted your time. The sleepwalker treatment wasn't our best work." "How so?" Chris said. "All of XCOM's records say you and your comrades developed a treatment." "You're dead set," Weir replied. "We did develop a treatment, but we never used it. Director Falk decided to let all the sleepwalkers die of natural causes." Akira noticed out the corner of her eye that all of her family members looked crestfallen. Blake's eyes flickered to his daughter as he asked, "But the treatment works, right? You were able to wake up some people, weren't you?" "One," Weir said in a deadpan tone. "Agent Carter woke up one sleepwalker. I would hardly call that proof the treatment works." Akira was still looking down at the stack of paper she'd taken from Weir's printer. But using her power of telepathy, she could detect a building sense of despair in her family members, and she finally understood why. The sleepwalker treatment they were after had been their last best hope in a plan to deprogram Akira, to restore her to the way she'd been before setting foot on Kauai. Deep inside her own soul, Akira felt satisfied. She didn't want to go back. While her family continued their vain efforts to get information out of the supercomputer holding Dr. Weir's consciousness, Akira looked down and finally started to read the book's worth of research she'd taken. She spotted a note on the top page, the one printed most recently. The typed letters spelled out the following message. "Strange Jap girl visited today. Tried to reconcile hyperspace theory with Venn-gate problem. Gave me an idea. Reconfigure one of those progenitor hyperspace cores to open Venn-gates instead of quantum wavefront. Plausible idea. Enter hyperspace via dimensional gate, find a plane where time and space are desynchronized, and loiter there. Time travel, in a sense. But this just reopens the issue with circular time again. Utility limited. Theory is untestable without an accompanying progenitor hyperspace gate. Would also need a starship. Unlikely to get one anytime soon. Idea shelved." Akira could still hear her parents talking to Dr. Weir, but she had completely lost interest. Each page of the good doctor's research was more interesting than the last. She skimmed, taking in whatever she could. Akira didn't understand much of the doctor's writing. There were some very advanced aspects of physics and atomic theory in there, but Akira did understand the concept of hyperspace and faster-than-light travel. Every time the doctor's writing turned to the subject, she sat up and paid attention. Differential geometry, electrodynamic theory, four-vector mathematics, so much of Dr. Weir's findings went directly over Akira's head, but she did understand the general concept. Dr. Weir theorized that if a spacecraft entered hyperspace with a heavily modified hyperspace core, then a highly specific type of time travel would become possible. So highly specific, in fact, that the concept as a whole ran into a serious problem that limited its overall usefulness. All in all, it was a fun thought experiment. Akira knew that time travel couldn't be possible, but she did enjoy fantasizing about the possibility. If she could remake the past, she would change the whole world and live out her days on some tropical island with Rafi Bakir. And nobody would ever so much as threaten to dismantle her perfect paradise ever again. It was a pipe dream, and she knew it. But for some reason, when the time came to leave Site X and return to the Archangel, Akira found that she just couldn't let the idea go. She brought her backpack down to the lab and collected nearly 500 sheets of Dr. Weir's research. At the last second before she departed, Akira spotted a curious-looking device hanging from a hook on the wall. It was some kind of technologically sophisticated backpack with wires and cables connected to a cuff meant to be worn on the right arm. Feeling curious, Akira grabbed the whole package and took it with her. During the flight back to Kansas, Akira barely even noticed her parents' disappointment in the way the expedition turned out. She was all too eager to continue studying the stack of papers in her backpack. Akira could think of nothing else but the research she'd taken from the site with her. And in her dreams at night, Akira envisioned herself building the modified hyperspace core. She saw herself building that perfect paradise. And she wished there was some way to make that dream a reality.